Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Or if it's your first time, welcome to my channel. My name is Marlene and I talk about eating disorder recovery and everything related to healing the relationship with your own body, with food and with movement. As many of you know, I had an eating disorder for nearly 10 years and I use this channel to talk about eating disorders, to talk about recovery, and of course to inspire those of you who are still in recovery or who are even unsure if they want recovery, and to show you guys that full recovery is possible. And today I want to talk a little bit more about my own experience, how my eating disorder showed, because it's just going to show you that disordered behaviors can come in so many shapes and so many forms, and sometimes even diet culture sees them as something completely normal when they are not. So I developed an eating disorder at the age of like 16, 17, and in the beginning nobody even noticed. I started to work out more, and even though I always liked to work out, I always loved to move my body, it was different. Before that I was always for, working out and having fun. And all of a sudden I was like, maybe I can change my body a little bit. Now I was always a very skinny person, just naturally, and ironically enough, I always wanted to gain weight. But all of a sudden when I was like, when I just turned 17, a lot of stuff in my family just like fell apart. My mom and I moved out from living with my stepdad for a long time. My sister moved away. My dad was in America and I'm from Germany. So it just felt like everything was falling apart, and I honestly think that I just needed some control. So I started to control my food. And it was weird because I remember from one day to another, I started seeing things in the mirror that I never saw before. As I said before, I actually always wanted to gain weight. I was always super skinny. I always felt like very, very like a late bloomer. And all of a sudden, I started Googling, I started to learn about calories and carbs and whatnot, and believe it or not, I didn't even know what calories were. I know that there were some number, but I had no idea how much I was eating, how much was quote-unquote normal or not. And we all know there is no such thing as normal when it comes to that, because everybody has just like a different need. But I started Googling all those things, and I started like reading about all those different diets, and it was like so weird because I really felt confused. I was like, okay, that diet says no carbs, that diet says no fats, that diet says track macros, micros, whatnot. And I just started a lot of things, and I felt like I could never really stick with it. And over time I felt like I'm not disciplined enough. And growing up I was always more like the child that was daydreaming, that was forgettable, that was not super organized. And around like 13, 14 years that changed because I just like made myself the organized child because I didn't want to get in trouble anymore. But that was a thing that I really remember feeling not disciplined enough, and it really, really got to me because I, remember those feelings as a kid and how I always got in trouble for not being disciplined enough. And so even though nobody else was actually watching that, I was telling myself I'm not disciplined enough. And I remember looking in the mirror, and all of a sudden I saw my legs as too big or my belly as too big. I saw my arms were not right. Like I was literally finding flaws in everything that I never found flaws in before. Because again, before that it was always like, oh, I had like, a little bit more curves or something like that. And all of a sudden it like turned around, and it was so hard for me to understand. And back then I didn't even have the knowledge that I have now to understand how we like slowly teach our brain certain things. So the more I was reading about diet culture, the more I was engaging with other people, with kids from my school that were working out. I started to go to the gym with one girl that was always super, super much about like not eating enough and over exercising, but I thought that was cool, that was normal. She was one of the popular kids, so I thought I can just do that too. And then I, started to get positive reactions like, oh, you're so disciplined, or your stomach looks so flat, you have abs. And of course, being in that situation where I already felt very alone, this positive reinforcement from the outside felt so good to me, and it kind of became addictive. So it started to get like to the point where I really couldn't skip a workout. At the same time, I had so much trouble to stick with all those rules that I set for myself, because I tried low carb, but then I was like, what if I'm still eating too many calories? And then I tried low fat, and then I was like, but now I'm eating carbs I'm not supposed to. So slowly but surely I started to cut out all those things. And then it was so hard for me to stick with those strict diet rules that I set for myself that I joined a Facebook group. Back in the day, Facebook was really, really big. That was back in 2013, I want to say. And I joined this Facebook group of women that supported each other losing weight. And this fired me up. And it was so interesting because honestly, there were really some women in there that, at least from what I could tell, kind of like kept their balance. Of course, you never know. But I was just like spiraling into disordered behaviors and thoughts so quickly that I remember posting certain things. And even the women in this Facebook group were like, oh, that doesn't sound healthy. Like, take care. Like, you still gotta eat enough. And mind you, I never really wanted to lose weight before. Before that, I was actually stepping on the scale and see if I could get above a certain number. And all of a sudden it turned around. But I didn't even realize what was happening. And what I realized was I want to be anorexic. Now, I know that this sounds very extreme and that a lot of people feel like they were kind of like slipping into that. And for many, many years, I actually really thought that I made the decision to be anorexic because I remember that night so vividly where I told myself I want to be anorexic. But now I understand that I was already sick back then. No healthy person would ever want to have an eating disorder. Nobody would ever wish for that. So that wish was probably already the consequence of my disordered behaviors, of my disordered thoughts, and of course also of everything that was going on around me. So I remember I want to be anorexic, and I Googled, what do anorexic people eat? I know it might sound weird, but that's what I did back then. And back then I found a lot of information, which is why now I am so careful about what I share online, which is why I'm not sharing numbers, whether when it comes to calories, weight, movement, or whatever, because of course, chances are still that somebody, picks up something disordered, but I just found so many Reddit entries and like pages and Facebook groups where people were actually talking about that. Back in 2013, the pro-Ana community was very, very big, and especially on Tumblr, which is one of the websites that I loved to use back then. It was so easy to slip into that community where eating disorders were really, really glorified. Not only anorexia, also eating disorders like bulimia, over-exercising. There were a lot of very unhealthy quotes, pictures, tips, and overall the glorification of this quote-unquote lifestyle when it's actually a disorder. So there were like black and white pictures of people in very unhealthy bodies, and I remember feeling so torn toward it. And it was also at the same time where I was really, really falling into a depressive episode, and so I've really felt torn towards this dark, actually like really sad community that I wanted to be a part of. I actually remember years later I had a conversation with somebody and they were like, well, yeah, when we are in a negative mindset already, or if we are like in a negative state, when we struggle with our mental health already, we want to have community. And oftentimes we feel like we can have more community with those who are struggling too. But in this whole pro-Ana or pro-Mia community, it gets so disordered so quickly because people like hype each other up to like eat less, to give each other like very, very unhealthy quote-unquote tips. And I remember just like spending way too much time on those pages, also spending way too much time on those sites on Instagram, and back then I was actually also less regulated. So I was really, really going down a rabbit hole every night, and it kind of made me feel comfortable. It was like I was waiting for nighttime because then I could finally lay in bed and like scroll through those things. And I also remember some days where I had eaten more than I wanted to. It was like, okay, this is my motivation to like do better tomorrow. Or on days where I was already laying in bed with a growling stomach, I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing this for. And I know that this is extremely unhealthy. And looking back now, I have so much compassion with that little girl that was going through this and that thought she had to do all those things to get attention, to be loved, to get control over her life. Because now I know that I struggled so many years after this, just in order to be skinny. And of course, it's not only to be skinny. Of course, it's not only that. But it felt like this was my only goal in life. After being a big part of those pro-Ana communities, but also of a lot of fitness communities, whether it was in my city or also like on the internet, I was even working with certain brands together and getting like positive reinforcement because I looked so fit and so healthy when I was actually not healthy at all. I heard of the cheat day. The cheat day was super big back in 2014 and basically meant that you ate the whole week quote unquote clean, And then you had like one cheat day, for instance, a Sunday, where you could eat everything that you wanted to. Now as I'm working as a coach and I'm looking back, I'm very aware that this is actually just a glorification of a binge restrict cycle, which I clearly ended up in. But back then I was like, oh yeah, this is great, because now I'm having the motivation to like stick to my diet rules, and then on Sunday I can just eat whatever. And of course, what happened was that not only did I not sleep the night before because I was literally so excited to finally be able to eat, but I also ate so many things that my stomach was hurting, that I felt like a complete failure. I felt completely out of control. And then I told myself, okay, this week I'm gonna do better. And the next morning I stepped on the scale, and of course the weight had gone up because I had a lot of food in my system, I had a lot of water retention. And of course, if we undereat and then we eat a little bit more, the body will just like hold on to that, which is completely natural and actually the body's way of like making sure that you survive. But I remember this one Monday morning when I stepped on the scale and I saw a number that was higher than any number that I had seen before. And weirdly enough, 2 years before that, I would have wanted that number to be there. I would have wanted to be in a body that's more curvy. But all of a sudden, my standard changed so much that I panicked, that I went to the gym, that I stayed there way too long, that I went to the treadmill crying. And it was just at a point where I was like, okay, I can't do those cheat meals anymore. I actually have to stick with this like diet without cheat days. And that's where I went really restrictive. Now at that point, my boyfriend at the time actually was like noticing that something was going on. It was honestly very hard not to. And he was like starting to, trying to make me eat. And honestly, I know that he just like really, really wanted to do his best. Also at this point, if you want me to make a video about how to treat somebody with an eating disorder as a boyfriend, as a family member, as a friend, let me know please, because there's definitely do's and don'ts and certain things that might actually be helpful for them. And what my boyfriend did at the time was definitely what he, felt like he needed to do because he really cared for me, but I was just not receptive to it. I started lying, I started to get snippy, I was like, no, I've eaten already, and of course he was very aware that I didn't. So at this point, I was beginning to like really lie a lot, to like throw away stuff, to throw away papers, or like to pretend that I had eaten something, to pretend that I had used dishes already. And my mom honestly didn't really notice, which I can't blame her for at all. I was nearly 18 years old. She was working. There was no way how she would have noticed that. And also, you don't just expect your kid to randomly develop an eating disorder, even though unfortunately that's oftentimes how it goes. But this is just something that I would never blame my parents or my friends for. I'm gonna stop the video at this point. I could tell you more about the years and years and years after I had developed my eating disorder, and I actually did that before already. But the reason why I'm sharing all of this in this video is to show you that there were many, many points where I could have stopped, where I could have made it not go worse. But I was so caught up in this idea of having an eating disorder, of belonging to a community, of having a very specific looking body, that this was all that mattered for me. And again, this is a sign that my brain was already very disordered. And I think if I would have had the tools to stop, if I would have had the knowledge that I have today, I wouldn't have gone through like 9 years of an eating disorder. But unfortunately, that was not the case. And all these different things, all these thoughts may also show you how fast the brain can basically rewire and focus on something different. I went from I want to gain weight to I want to lose weight in a matter of months. And that was not because my body changed. My body had stayed the same the whole time. It was my brain that changed because I focused so much on diet culture, on those workout groups, on those weight loss groups, that all of a sudden I had a completely different goal in my head. So for those of you who are struggling with an eating disorder and who think they could never accept their body when it gains weight, or for those of you who are in recovery and feel like I will always see my flaws, I will never be okay with my body again, let this be your sign how fast your brain can change, and that you subconsciously taught your brain those things. This is why you are not able to see yourself objectively. I promise you right now, when you look in the mirror, you will perceive yourself completely different than somebody who loves you, somebody who looks at you from the outside, even somebody who sees you as neutral. They will not see the flaws that you are seeing. And in my case, to be completely honest, switching my brain again to like a healthy mindset took way longer than just a couple of months. In fact, it was like 2.5 years. But I got there too. So even if you are doubting, even if you have had an eating disorder for decades or only for a few months, no matter how long it was, it is possible for you to switch your focus, to go from disorder to a healthy mindset again, to like yourself again, or to just accept your body and respect your body. All of these things are possible. And again, I just really want to point out that you're not a lost cause, that even if you've been to treatment centers, even if you've tried therapy, because that's what I felt at a certain point. I felt like I've tried all these things, maybe I'm a lost cause, and guess what? I'm not, because today I'm standing here fully recovered, definitely not a lost cause. And please let this be your sign that recovery is possible for you too. As always, leave a comment if you have any other questions. Reach out to me if you feel like you need a little bit more support on your recovery journey. And otherwise, I will see you in the next one.